Elena had always dreamed of love, of walking down the aisle toward someone who saw her as more than a bargaining chip, but that dream shattered when her father signed away her life to the ruthless billionaire, Damien Blackwood. She had never met him until their wedding day, standing stiff and pale in her white gown while his cold, piercing eyes raked over her trembling frame. Damien wasn't marrying her out of love, but out of vengeance against her father's debts, and Elena's virginity was the final collateral. That night, as the city lights glittered through the penthouse windows, he claimed her with a hunger that shocked her, his touch both intoxicating and terrifying, leaving her torn between shame and an unfamiliar heat that burned beneath her skin. Elena cried silently after he fell asleep, her body aching, her heart broken, whispering prayers that maybe he would leave her alone after that one night. But Damien was not a man who tasted something once and let it go. He had awakened a fire he had no intention of extinguishing. The next morning, Elena thought perhaps Damien would ignore her, return to his empire, and she would be nothing more than an ornament in his mansion. But she was wrong. He dragged her out of bed, ordering her to breakfast at his long dining table where servants watched with bowed heads. His voice was ice, accusing her of weakness, of being spoiled, of being unworthy of the Blackwood name. Elena wanted to defend herself, but every time she opened her mouth, his sharp tongue cut her down, reminding her that she was his possession now. Her virgin innocence had been stolen, and in its place, Damien seemed intent on molding her into someone who existed only for his pleasure. He cornered her often, his lips pressing bruising kisses against hers, his hands roaming as though he couldn't get enough, whispering that no matter how much she hated him, her body belonged to him now. Elena's spirit fought to remain unbroken, but his dominance was relentless, and her heart ached with confusion as her body betrayed her with shivers of unwanted desire. Damien showered her with jewels, gowns, and a sprawling mansion that glittered with gold, but Elena saw them not as gifts, but as bars of a golden cage. She longed for freedom, for sunlight that wasn't filtered through penthouse glass, for laughter unchained by fear. Every night, Damien returned to her bed, his desire never ceasing, his need for her only growing more insistent. Elena pleaded for space, begged for time to breathe, but Damien only smirked, calling her his little captive bird who would never learn to fly without him. Still, in the quiet of her solitude, she began to notice cracks in his armor, the way he clenched his fists when he thought of his past, the shadows in his eyes when he stared at her too long. She wondered what had made him so cruel, but the moment she reached out, he shut her down, reminding her that kindness wasn't part of their contract. Yet in those stolen seconds of vulnerability, Elena felt the faint stirrings of something dangerous: empathy. One night, after Damien had consumed her again with his unrelenting hunger, Elena dared to ask why he hated her so much. At first, he laughed coldly, but then his voice broke into bitterness as he revealed the truth. Her father had ruined his family years ago, leaving his mother to die in poverty while the Blackwoods rose in wealth. This marriage was his revenge, and she, the innocent daughter, was his weapon to break the man who had broken him. Elena's heart clenched, torn between guilt for her father's sins and anger at Damien for punishing her instead. She saw then that behind his cruelty was pain, behind his hunger was a void he couldn't fill. For the first time, she reached out to touch his cheek, whispering that she wasn't his enemy. Damien froze, his eyes dark and conflicted, before pushing her hand away and storming from the room, leaving Elena trembling with the knowledge that his cruelty was built on wounds deeper than she imagined. The days turned into a battle of wills. Elena began to fight back, no longer the silent, submissive bride he had expected. When he kissed her roughly, she kissed back with fire, meeting his dominance with unexpected defiance. This infuriated Damien, yet it also thrilled him, igniting a passion between them that was both destructive and magnetic. He would claim her harder, punish her with his touch, but afterward he lingered longer by her side, watching her as though trying to understand why she didn't crumble. Elena herself was confused. She hated his cruelty, yet every night her body craved his touch more, and her heart whispered treacherous secrets of longing. She began to see glimpses of the man beneath the mask, the boy who had lost everything, and she wondered if her presence was changing him, softening the stone around his heart, or if she was merely falling deeper into the trap of a man who would never love her. One evening, Elena overheard Damien arguing with his lawyer about dissolving certain contracts. She realized he was trying to destroy her father's empire piece by piece, and panic filled her. She confronted him, demanding he stop, telling him that her father's sins should not cost her everything she loved. To her surprise, Damien didn't lash out but instead pulled her close, whispering that she was the only thing he wanted, that nothing else mattered anymore. His confession shook her, for though his words were harsh, his eyes burned with a truth she could not deny. That night, when he claimed her, it was different, gentler, slower, as though he feared breaking her. Elena found herself surrendering willingly for the first time, not from fear but from a dangerous pull of the heart. And afterward, when he held her against his chest instead of turning away, she realized the chains between them were no longer just his. They were hers too. Elena tried to deny it, but she was falling for him. The cruel billionaire who had stolen her freedom was becoming the man she longed to touch, to heal, to understand. She hated herself for it, hated the weakness of her heart, yet every time he whispered her name against her skin, every time his hands traced her curves as though memorizing them, she melted. Damien, too, was changing. He no longer mocked her tears, no longer pushed her away when she sought to comfort him. But love was dangerous in their world. The enemies of his empire circled like wolves, and Elena feared that her heart, now bound to his, would be shattered when reality struck. She wondered if Damien could ever truly let go of his thirst for revenge, or if she was destined to remain both his captive and his weakness. Their fragile peace shattered when Elena discovered documents hidden in his study, proof that Damien still intended to bankrupt her father completely. Her heart broke, believing every gentle touch had been a lie, every whispered promise a trap. When she confronted him, tears streaming, Damien's face hardened, but behind his fury was desperation. He tried to explain that destroying her father was justice, that it had nothing to do with her, but Elena felt used, her love betrayed. She packed her things and fled the mansion, seeking refuge in a small apartment far from the glittering world of wealth. For the first time, Damien realized what it meant to lose her, and the emptiness she left behind was unbearable. His empire suddenly seemed meaningless without her warmth, his bed a grave of cold sheets where her scent no longer lingered. Damien searched for her relentlessly, his pride stripped away by the ache in his chest. When he finally found her, she was working at a tiny cafe, her once sparkling eyes dulled by heartbreak. He fell to his knees before her, shocking both her and the strangers around them, confessing that he was nothing without her, that his vengeance had blinded him until she showed him light. Elena wanted to resist, wanted to keep her heart locked, but his voice broke, and for the first time, she saw not the cruel billionaire but the wounded man begging for forgiveness. Slowly, painfully, she allowed him back into her life, but on her terms this time. Damien agreed, vowing to end his vendetta, to destroy the chains of hatred that had bound him for so long. For Elena, it was the first sign of true redemption. Months later, their marriage no longer felt like a prison, but a bond forged in fire and rebuilt in love. Damien had changed. He was still fierce, still powerful, but now his cruelty had melted into protectiveness, his hunger transformed into devotion. Elena, once a trembling virgin forced into chains, was now his equal, his partner, the queen beside his throne. When he claimed her now, it wasn't out of vengeance or possession, but out of love so fierce it stole her breath. She forgave him fully, and he vowed never to let her go. In the glittering ballroom of their mansion, surrounded by allies and enemies alike, Damien kissed her passionately, declaring her not his prisoner, but his forever. And as Elena smiled through tears, she knew that love had triumphed over cruelty, turning chains into wings, and making her not the victim of a cruel billionaire, but the woman who tamed him.